Hello and welcome to CFSS TV. I'm Ron Weber here with Afshan Khan and Mohammed Fahim. Afshan is an immigration attorney and she's going to talk to us today about some of the new laws with immigration.
Thank you, Mr. Weber. I appreciate you having me here to provide some more information, hopefully, about the immigration laws and sort of what's been happening as of late.
Afshan, let me ask you something. Let's talk a little bit about the EB-5 immigrant classification. Exactly
Sure,
what does EB-5 mean? And then we will kind of dig a little bit deeper into it.
Sure. So EB-5 is a specific type of visa which allows individuals to be able to invest a great amount of capital and their company into our economy, allowing them to then apply for lawful residence based on that investment.
Okay, so now is that for someone who is already in the country over here on some other visa, or do they apply for it overseas before they come, or it could be either or?
Generally, it can be either or, but usually the individuals are applying from abroad, where they're setting up the investments and the companies and planning to put these companies here in our economy, and they apply through the embassies, their appropriate embassies.
Okay, my question again, and my understanding so far is that individuals are eligible to apply for lawful permanent residence in the U.S. if they make the necessary investments in a commercial enterprise in the U.S., right? And or create in circumstances, certain circumstances, preserve 10 permanent full-time jobs for qualified workers, right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
So just to give you a little bit of background about what an EB-5 requirements are. So the individual must invest at least $1 million of capital into the economy for their business, or depending on the area, if it's a rural area, it could be at least 500,000. And it does require at least full-time employment for 10 lawfully residing or U.S. citizens of the United States.
Okay, so the question that comes to my mind now, Ron and Afshan, is I am an investor outside the country. How do I find out about opportunities over here, what kind of business to get into? As an immigration lawyer, do you provide those kind of resources, services?
Well, usually as an immigration lawyer, usually the clients sort of already have their venture set or their business plan set, and they're looking to start the process, start the filing process itself, and sort of have hopefully the immigration help running as smoothly as possible. So, but that being said, we definitely can, I can definitely sort of state what are different possible avenues to use an investor at the EB-5 visa itself. And
okay, folks, thank you. And that's where we come in with the Center for Strategic Solutions. So if you know of someone who wants to set up a business over here, who wants to invest in the United States, come in as an investor, you're more, we'll be more than happy to work with them to do some of the groundwork over here. We can find out the opportunities for them. We can find out which agencies to work with, and feel free to refer people to us. The website is cfss.us, and we have a number of people that work with us, consultants who will be more than happy to provide some help. So, Afshan, let me ask you now.
Sure.
What are the proposed changes by DHS, and how would this impact the EB-5 program? I mean, my understanding so far is that the priority date retention is going to be impacted. There's going to be increases to the investment amounts. Reforming the targeted employment area, TEA requirement, the designation process over there, changes to the process for removing conditions, additional proposals that have been made that are coming in. How is that going to impact?
Well, currently, USCIS has put in a rulemaking process where they're suggesting proposals for the EB-5 processing itself. And some of these suggestions do involve having a priority date such that based on when the actual application is filed, the date sort of prioritizes the investor. If someone, for example, filed earlier than another investor, that person would have a sooner opportunity in terms of seeing their application move faster compared to another person.
Approximately how long is it taking for an EB-5 investor visa to be approved?
You know, it does vary as of late, but I would say close to about a year or so.
Wow,
Um,
that
yeah.
long?
Yes, it can. Yeah.
So if the ground realities change over here, if the market conditions change, I mean, can I get my money back for applying for this visa? Okay.
Unfortunately, it's difficult to get the money back. The purpose is that it's supposed to be a long-term investment for the American economy. So, well, the first process is you get approved based on the copious documentation showing proof of your investment and your capital and being able to meet the requirements of an EB-5. Once you have that approved, then you'll be able to then apply for your conditional residence
Okay.
and become a lawful resident.
Yeah. So on the flip side now, let's say that I am coming from India, Pakistan, any of those Asian countries, because I'm from India originally, folks, so I talk about India, I don't know about the other countries.
As am I. So.
Okay. The Reserve Bank of India has got a lot of, restrictions in place as to the capital moving out of the country in the
Right.
form of US dollars. How does an investor go around that?
Well, I think that's why it's important to have a good, competent immigration attorney for that, as well as a very good individual that is familiar with the business plans and business models that can help learn to navigate those laws, because they can be very complex.
In your home country also. So do you
Yes.
work with other attorneys in other countries to provide that kind of a service, or is it only restricted on this side?
I do work with other attorneys, but mostly it's finding attorneys here who have that experience, that extensive experience filing the EB-5s, as well as business companies that have this experience in terms of preparing the business models and making sure that the investor is able to meet the sufficient requirements.
Okay, sounds good. So how is the DHS now proposing to reform the TEA, the Targeted Employment Area designation process? What exactly is meant by the Targeted Employment Area?
Well, basically, the targeted employment area, sort of specific areas in which the American economy feels we definitely need strong long-term investments. And so I guess the purpose of DHS's or USCIS's changes or proposed changes is to try to...
Okay, let's stop a little bit right there. When I hear something like, USICS or whatever,
Oh, sure.
what does that mean? What is the full form of
of course.
USICS?
So I'm always so used to using abbreviations all the time. So, so
I'm thinking of it from the listeners, from the viewers'
Right,
point
of
of view,
course.
as to if they
Of
hear
course.
an acronym, I don't know what that means. So
Right,
please
right.
explain.
So USCIS stands for United States Citizenship and Immigration Services. So
Okay.
they're the federal agency that oversees and adjudicates all immigration petitions, whether it be family or work-based petitions such as the EB-5.
So
visa.
at this point, we are not involving the United States Department of Commerce or the International Trade Administration or any of those federal agencies that would like to, bring in external investments. Like at one point, I was running a company called, American International Marketing back before I came to Chicago from Houston. And we were focusing a lot on bringing in, foreign direct investment into the country. So if someone wants to bring in that FDI, is that something that you would be working with or interested in working it, qualified to work with, something like that?
Well, it's definitely something that would be important to be familiar with, and something that I'd want to definitely have that as part of my requirements in terms of making sure that we
Okay.
meet the EB-5 applications, sort of what they're looking for. So definitely having those connections and having those opportunities to speak with these agencies, and also hearing sort of how it can sort of strengthen the actual investor's application itself.
Okay. Ron, I think you had a question that you wanted to ask Afshan today.
Yes, does the proposed ban on some countries apply to alien investors from these countries?
Oh, that's a zinger right there.
Yeah,
Come
yeah.
on.
Well, I have to say, unfortunately, with the recent executive order, it did have quite a devastating effect on a lot of individuals from these specific 7 countries: Libya, Somalia, Sudan, Syria, Iraq, Iran. And as part of the executive order, it actually also stopped any kind of processing of immigration benefits, meaning if someone wanted to apply both family petitions as well as even work petitions, and that would assume that would include the EB-5 visa petitions themselves. Thankfully, now that there's an injunction in place, USCIS and DHS actually put forth an internal memo stating that they wouldn't, that this executive order would not be implemented towards EB-5 investors from these specific countries. So they'll still be able to be adjudicated and reviewed. That being said, of course, there'll be a lot more stringent guidelines to follow, and I think it'll be a lot more difficult maybe to get the EB-5, but at least they'll continue the processing.
So what are the proposed revisions now to the Form I-526? I know the Immigration and Naturalization Service is very good on using all kinds of forms. And okay, so what are this is the immigrant petition by an alien entrepreneur, right? So
Right.
what are the proposed revisions that are coming up?
Well, some proposed revisions in terms of making sure that you document the type of capital that you'll be investing and the fact that it does sufficiently meet. And one thing to also state is that one of the proposals by DHS is actually to increase the capital to 1.35 million rather than
Okay.
1 million.
Okay.
So making sure that the investor can show that they meet these these capital requirements, as well as in terms of documentation for the business plans and making sure that they're very extensive in terms of showing what successes they've had previously in their businesses and how they can project that success here in the American economy.
Are there any specific areas or industries that the government would like to see investors coming in and investing in? Any particular areas of the economy that you have seen?
You know, it's hard to say. I would say that so long as it's an investor that can definitely guarantee that long-term investment and guarantee those long-term jobs, especially
Okay.
with sort of the economic state of in our country, guaranteeing those jobs for U.S. citizens or lawful residents or people that are lawfully allowed to work here, that's sort of the main concern, and that's sort of the main impetus of having this EB-5 visa application.
Okay, when you say guaranteeing the employment, I know that Illinois is an at-will state. So I come in as an investor. I hire Ron and about 9 other people, and I find out that they really don't work for me, and I was misled as to what their capabilities are. Does that at-will still apply to me, or is the USICS going to come on my neck and say, hey, you hired 10 people and you fired 5 in the first month? You're out of here.
Right. Well, if it turns out that the actual individual wasn't qualified for that specific employment, I would say that it wouldn't be held against the investor itself. I
Okay.
would say that that really the focus is making sure that there are jobs that the investor can guarantee for anyone that is able to be qualified for them. There will be these 10 jobs for the long term.
Okay, well, how do you define the long term?
So that'll at least be for the next 2-3 years, that it'll be full-time, that it's appropriate for not only U.S. citizens, but also lawful residents or individuals who have work authorization here, and that can guarantee that, that it's something that will at least be here for the next few years.
Now, at one point, I had a web development company in Houston called Web Houston International, and we wanted to bring in a programmer, a DBA, and they came down on us and say, you've got to pay a minimum of $60,000 at that point for a DBA, and for a programmer, $80,000 and all of that. So as an EB-5 investor, if I'm coming in, is there any requirements, regulations that I have to meet that says that I have to pay this much for who I'm hiring, or can I make those decisions based on market conditions?
It is based on market conditions and based on sort of your business itself and the venture that you have proposed that you want to introduce to the American economy. So also depending on how much you're investing and hopefully it being proportional to the amount of income that the employees would be receiving.
Now, does that have to be any kind of business? Can I bring in a service business, a restaurant, or does it have to be manufacturing?
It has to be
any
a for-profit business, so
Yeah,
a joint
obviously
venture, or
for-profit, yeah.
and so long as and usually companies such as corporations are usually much more, or business trusts are much more,
Okay.
not say easier, but maybe a little bit more leeway in terms of having that kind of documentation to sort of substantiate what they will do.
There is so much more to learn on this, folks. And we've got Afshan Khan in the studio with us today. She's an immigration attorney specializing in immigration. Do you have a website that people get in touch with you? If someone wants to get in touch with you, how do we find you?
Yes. So I have an office both in Streamwood as well as in Illinois, in Rockford, Illinois, I apologize. And I have a website, www.conesq.com. And you're definitely welcome to check out my website, and I'd be happy to speak with anyone who'd be interested in this particular subject or anything in regards to immigration.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. We got Afshan Khan in the studio with us, and I'm kind of sharing the hosting duties with Ron Weber, our Vice President of Business Development at the Center for Strategic Solutions. And if you need more assistance, like I said, if you need help with your market research, if someone wants to move in over here, we will be more than happy to work with you folks and get you some information before you decide to invest in the country. And Afshan, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you for having me.